All right, well, thank you for being here. Good afternoon. So yes, I'm going to be talking about global trends in free speech and press, but at a deeper level, I'm going to be talking about information and the control of information. Information that you have access to, information that you don't have access to, and the forces out there in the world that are shaping the degree to which you and I and people around the world can get access to information. Now, to do that, I'm going to talk about three news events that have been in the papers in the last 3 weeks. And if you've probably heard of some of them, and if you've read about them, you read them in isolation, no big deal. Normal news story, interesting, and you move on. But what I'd like us to do is step back and think about them together. And if you think about them together, I think a broader pattern emerges. A pattern which can speak to the degree to which we have free speech and free press around the world. A pattern which also suggests that some of that power over information is transferring from us as individuals to states, to governments. And I think this should give us pause. All right, so what we're going to do, the three events we're going to look at, we're going to start in Turkey. And we're going to talk about a legal case playing out between the president of Turkey, Erdogan, and an individual who made a meme and compared the president to Gollum. You can't do that. And it's led to all sorts of interesting legal questions, and I think relates to what we're talking about today. After Turkey, we're going to go north and look at what's playing out in the United Kingdom right now. A case, recently a judge this last week released a report talking about the alleged assassination attempt supported by the president of Russia, of a Russian citizen, in London at a hotel, and what that suggests about free press. And finally, we're going to go over to China and talk about a news article that broke in the Times this week looking at how the Chinese government is now using television, national television, to broadcast confessions of individuals they believe have committed a crime against the country. So, all right, let's start in Turkey, because I really think this might be the most interesting story in the world right now. I don't know if we have Lord of the Ring fans in here, but this is good stuff. All right, so here we go. Here is the president of Turkey, Prince Recep Erdogan. He's been in power for a long time. He was the prime minister for a long time, and then he decided, I think I should become president. So Turkey is a democracy, but they are a borderline democracy right now. All right, well, this gentleman up here, Bilgin Sifsi, he is a physician, and he's got some free time on his hand, and he likes making memes. So he made a meme comparing President Erdogan to Gollum. All right, and here, this is good stuff, right? So the top one is, they're a little surprised. The middle one, they're happy, and the bottom one, again, my favorite, is they're eating some chicken, right? Now, the only problem here is that this is illegal in Turkey. You can't criticize the president. So Mr. Sifti lost his job. He's also facing a potential 2-year prison sentence for this. All right, so this is a big deal. Now, so as this started playing out, he started thinking, man, I could go to jail for this. I was just having some fun. What can I do? So he came up with a very, I think, unique legal defense. He said, I'm not criticizing the president. Don't you know you're Lord of Rings? Gollum is not a bad guy. He's actually good. Well, this sent waves, right? And this made Lord of the Ring fans all over the world, their head just started exploding, right? Because now we can have this conversation again about whether Gollum is good or evil, right? So, and now for me, what's most fascinating is Turkey and the Turkish legal system buys into this. They've created a panel to determine whether Gollum is good or evil. And depending on the results of that panel, that will dictate the punishment for Mr. Sifsi. People from all over the world are weighing in on this, including the director of the Lord of the Rings movie, who released a statement saying, we can state categorically, none of them, speaking of these specific pictures, feature the character known as Gollum. All of them are images of the character called Smeagol, right? Okay, but the nuance of Lord of the Rings is really coming out here. Smeagol is a joyful, sweet character. Smeagol does not lie, deceive, or attempt to manipulate others. He is not evil, conniving, or malicious. These personality traits belong to Gollum. He's not guilty, right? He is innocent because of this. So the court case, the panel is currently debating and thinking about all this. And I think this is, in many ways, has kind of entered a bizarro world because we're not having the right conversation about this terrible Turkish law that within a democracy you can't criticize a president. Instead, we veered off into the land of, is Gollum a good or evil character? I think this is troubling and problematic. By comparison, in the United States, you can compare any politician to Gollum. Just this last week, Rand Paul posted something on Facebook saying that Donald Trump is very Gollum-like, right? Electing Gollum should not be our objective. Nobody cared, because that you can do that here. But I think the broader implication of what's playing out here should trouble us, that the Turkish democracy is moved the debate about what is considered acceptable speech. All right, let's transition up and talk about what's playing out in London right now. So the gentleman in the picture here is Alexander Litvinenko. He died in 2006. He is a Russian citizen. He was a critic of Vladimir Putin. He was in London hanging out, and he had tea with a couple friends, or not so much friends, individuals from Russia who were tied with the administration. They had their tea, and in the tea they put some polonium-210. This is not good for your health. He quickly was in the hospital, and he knew what had happened because he'd been criticizing Putin. He knew that this put him in trouble, and he knew he was on his deathbed. And on his deathbed, he calls out Putin. He says, "I know you did this to me. I know you poisoned me." And he says, "The howl of protest from around the world will reverberate, Mr. Putin, in your ears for the rest of your life," right? Well, wow. Putin didn't care, right? It's like, whatever. And I think this is this last week, a judge in the UK who was looking into this matter released a 300-page report saying that it was probably likely that Putin was behind this. There's no specific evidence, but boy, his hands are all over this. One of the individuals who carried out the poisoning has gone back and is now a member of parliament. He was also given a medal by Putin, not for this, but for something else, right? So there's some trouble. And so this is playing out, and we're having this conversation about what the Russian regime is up to. But this isn't new. Russia does this all the time, or the Putin regime does this all the time. This is an image of Boris Nemtsov. His body is laying on the bridge there. He was a Russian politician who was shot walking over a bridge with the Kremlin behind him. Of course, Putin comes and says, "Well, we have nothing to do with this. I want to find the real killer. This is terrible." But this is not uncommon. In the last 20 to 25 years, nearly 100 journalists have been killed in Russia. Critics have been silenced, pressured. This is a very, very common tactic. And again, Russia is, in theory, a democracy. Sometimes Putin just makes an individual go away, literally go away. So here's a picture from a political roundtable news conversation where they were discussing, and there was an individual, Mikhail Dagayan, who was being criticized or criticizing the Putin regime. So they taped the program, somebody from the regime sees this, sees the criticism of Putin, and they erase him. They literally erased him from the program. He was sitting right here. They forgot to erase his legs and his hands. So you can see a hand here. This doesn't connect anybody. These legs here, they don't connect. You got to be a little bit better about erasing, but maybe that was the point. We'll erase your ideas, but we'll let your legs stick around. Again, the broader point here is that we're seeing a pushback. State governments and regimes are trying to constrain the discourse that is playing out within a particular state. Now, for some of us, this isn't a big deal. And this last week, Trump came out and said, I don't see any evidence that Putin's really killing journalists. I mean, how do we know this is for sure? I think it's a little more problematic, and I think it's something we should be thinking about. The idea that the state is using the mechanisms at its disposal to shape and constrain public discourse, and in particular, discourse that is criticizing the regime. All right, let's move to China. This week, it was revealed that China is now broadcasting confessions. So the gentleman here with the beard, he worked for an NGO in China that offered legal aid. So somebody who was having legal problems could show up to his NGO. They would provide assistance. For some reason, China found this troubling, brought him in, said you violated the Chinese law, and you might serve a prison sentence. He then went on TV and gave a public confession, saying, "I'm sorry, I did this, I violated the law." Here's what he said. On TV, "I violated Chinese law through my activities here. I've caused harm to the Chinese government. I've hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. I apologize sincerely for this, and I'm very sorry that this ever happened." Backroom confessions are not surprising in China. Happens quite often. What's surprising is that China has now made the decision to say, we're going to broadcast these on national television. on CCTV, which you can get in the United States. Not just as one individual, many individuals. This is a rather common occurrence now on Chinese television, where they're broadcasting these confessions. And you have to ask yourself, why? What is the purpose of that? What are they trying to do? And again, I think the deeper message here is that states are starting to push back and trying to shape discussion and discourse. All right, so let's take big picture. What are all these 3 events that have occurred in the last week? What do they mean? What do they tell us? I think that the state governments have now figured out that we live in a new world. We live in a world where technology and information is available everywhere, right? Think about the changes that have happened over the last 15 to 20 years in terms of technology. The internet, blogs, email, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of these things have made information everywhere. It's like a buffet of information for us. Like, I'll take a little Fox News, and then I'm going to go to MSNBC. I'll do a little Twitter, right? You have everything at your disposal. This has scared states. In fact, they trembled. The access to information has brought them to their knees. Think about the Arab Spring, played out in 2011. Twitter, Facebook was used all over the place by the protesters to organize and to move their groups around the world, around the country. The Egyptian government didn't know what to do. They would bring opposition guys in and they would say, tell me about this Facebook. Give me the address of all your friends, and give me the password for all your friends. And the protesters are like, you don't get Facebook, do you? So it was clear that they didn't understand this technology. I think they're starting to learn. Even the United States, think about Edward Snowden, think about WikiLeaks, and how all of that information laid the United States open. All of our secrets available, including that we were tapping the phone of Prime Minister of Germany, Angela Merkel. Her actual phone. Not German phones, her phone. And it meant Barack had to make a somewhat awkward call. Hey, Angela, there's really nothing I can say. Right? So states saw this, and over the last 15 to 20 years, they've been humbled by the access to information. And like any good organism, I think what we're seeing now is they're responding. They've seen the threat, and now they're adapting their tactics to confront this. To use the obligatory Star Wars metaphor, the Empire Strikes Back. And I really think this captures what is going on. States have seen the reality. They've seen what's playing out. They've seen the way that information and the free flow of information through Facebook, through Twitter, through Instagram, all of these mechanisms can threaten their existence. And they're pushing back. It's not limited to just non-democracies. I believe the United States is very much a part of this. The Obama administration, in particular, is the most aggressive at publishing leaks of any administration since the Nixon administration. And in fact, they've published more leakers, individuals within the government who release information than all other presidents combined. More prosecutions for leakers under the 1917 Espionage Act than all other presidents combined. That says something. If you look at measures of free speech around the world and free press around the world, so this is Reporters Without Borders, you can look at where the United States ranks, and you say oh, yellow, well, that seems satisfactory. But if you dive into the numbers, look at some of the data, all right, well, the U.S. has got to be top 5, top 10, no, top 20. No, we got to go all the way down to that sweet spot at 49, right after Malta. And so you can ask yourself, the U.S. has been declining. Why is that happening? Well, the reality is all of the NSA spying, being reluctant to release information about drones and what we're doing there, putting pressure on journalists, putting pressure on those individuals in the government who want to leak information. So the United States has responded. Now, we're not assassinating journalists, but to suggest that the United States hasn't responded to the wave of technology would be naive. We certainly have. And I think the broader message is that we as consumers, as individuals in this international system, need to think more about that. There is, in many ways, states and politics and governments are just like organisms that face threats. It's not all that different from biology, where you evolve, survival of the fittest and evolution. That's what's happening here. Thomas Hobbes and Charles Darwin have a lot in common. And what we're seeing now is that governments have responded to the threat posed by technology over the last 10 to 15 to 20 years and are starting to push back. And I think we should be concerned, and I think we should be thinking about how we can push our governments to have a broader conversation about that particular threat. Thank you.